We'd like to welcome everybody to the Mosquito Police Millionaire podcast. My name is George Packard, and this is Brock DeSanto. I own the Mosquito Police Company. Brock owns a partnership to the company. In these videos, we're going to talk about a lot about growing your business and a lot of business advice and different things that we've gone through in business to kind of give you guys some insights as to what it's like to have a mosquito police business, along with other businesses that we've had over the years. We've learned a lot. We've got a lot of knowledge about the different businesses that we've been in, and I'll get into that in a minute. But in the very beginning here, I want to just tell you a story, a little bit about myself, and then when I'm done, Brock can talk about himself and how he got involved with the mosquito police. So first thing is my story. So I grew up a farm kid on a dairy farm, and my father, my mother were there. We had, I have 3 other siblings. So we grew up on this 50-cow dairy farm. Very hard life. You were up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you went to bed usually 8, 9 o'clock at night. And it was 7 days a week because there's no break during farm life. There's no break. The cows have to be fed. They have to be milked. It was just a nonstop. You had nobody that could actually come there on a weekend per se and take over for you so you could get off. You couldn't. There was no getting off. Oh, yeah. There just wasn't. And then the summers were just hectic as hell because you're making hay, making straw, you're doing everything for the cattle, the grazing, the pastures, all of that.
Fun stuff.
Oh, God. It was awful. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was the best part of my life. It was when I think back. But I was a kid,
Yeah. Don't get me wrong either. I mean, growing up, I think my brother's godmother had a farm, or her parents had a farm. We were over there on a regular basis doing the same stuff, so I always had a blast.
And we grew up in Wisconsin here, pretty much, or I did here. Where did you grow up?
Pembine. In Wisconsin, yeah. Okay. Half hour from Michigan borderline.
Okay, close to Michigan there. But, so the dairy farm thing for me, I kind of got, I guess, when I think about what happened in my life now and how I got to become a millionaire and how I got that was starting early on the farm, I think, with the work ethic. And, we were just born and bred to work, it seemed like, And so I kind of carried that philosophy with me all my life. And I would milk cows for my dad during the day. We'd milk the cows in the morning. And then I would go to these potato farmers that lived down the road, and I would start working for those guys. And so it was just more income, and I realized that, the more money I could make, the happier I was because I could buy things, We were so poor, the only clothes we had were hand-me-downs.
Yeah, I was going to say the same with us too. I mean, Mom and Dad lived paycheck to paycheck, so you didn't have anything else.
Yep, you got your brother's clothes.
Oh yeah, I was the oldest, so it always went downwards for me.
Did it?
So yeah.
Oh, you're lucky. By the time I got them, they were all full of holes, and Mom had big patches on the knees and all of that stuff, patching the pants all the time. But it was a good life, And then as I got older, I remember the day that my dad said to me, my brother and I were both working on the farm with my parents and my one brother. And my dad, I had gotten married that year, and my brother got married the same year. My dad sat us down and said, boys, there's not enough room on the farm for 3 families. And I remember this being very hard on my dad. It was hard for him to have to say, hey, something's got to give.
Yeah.
He didn't want to come out and say that, but he was forced to because now I was starting a family, my brother was starting a family, and Mom and Dad only had 50 milk cows.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't like these big massive farms that you see all over the place today, It wasn't like that. So I told my brother, I said, well, I said, Keith, you like farming more than I do. Why don't you stay with Dad on the farm, and I'll go to the city and find a job. So I went to my small town in Antigo, and I tried to find a job. And believe it or not, back in the day, you could not find a job in this town. You couldn't. They were just non-existent. And unless your dad worked for the city or the county, they always got their kids in at the next level, So there was no openings. There was nowhere to get in anywhere. So I ended up moving to Milwaukee. I got a job instantly, down there making cue sticks.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember that story when we were going to pick up one of the vans at one time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a fun time, but I quickly realized I didn't want to live in Milwaukee because it was just, I lived on a corner. Our corner was Hispanics here, black people here, and white people here. So you woke up to sirens, you went to bed to sirens. It wasn't a good atmosphere,
Yeah.
you know. And I was just like, you know what? I don't think I want to raise my kids in this.
No.
So we talked about it, and we're like, well, if we go back to our small town, we're going to have to find a way to make ends meet. Don't know how we're going to do it, but we don't want to raise our kids there. We knew that. We knew the big city wasn't for us.
Yeah.
You know, we were country kids, born and raised, and just didn't like that. So anyway, I wanted to be a cop. So I went to school for police science, and that about broke us, just trying to pay for that. And then I would always work, you know, for my dad, or again, back to the potato farmers and all of that. And then I went to school at night to be a policeman. And then I found out I only wanted to be a cop in my town. I didn't want to go to Chicago or Milwaukee. I wanted to be in my town, you know. And I was on a waiting list, and they told me it would be 7 years before an opening is even going to come up, because that's when the next guy was going to retire.
Retiring
And it's like, oh, shit, you know, that doesn't work. So anyway, I went to work for a construction company that moved into our town to build the Kmart. It was a big Kmart, a big retail store. So I went to work for them and doing construction. And when we were finishing up the store, these Kmart executives were there, and one of them approached me and said, hey, we heard that you did police science. And they said, would you be interested in a job for security? And I was like, I don't know anything about it, but sure, you know. So I took the job, and I loved the job. And I was there, so I was busting shoplifters all the time, and I was busting internal theft, you know, employee theft all the time. And it was a constant, it was, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Oh, yeah.
It was a challenge, you know, always trying to catch a thief. And so anyway, and I love my management staff. I had just a super group of people that my managers were fantastic. Anyway, so I was a loss control manager for 13 years there. And then one day after Christmas one year, now let me back up. So I was supposed to be promoted to a district manager. So my boss, my district manager, was sending me all over the country doing these internal investigations, busting rings of employee theft, you know, night cleaning crews, you name it. So I was going all over, staying on motels, and I had been groomed for 2 years to be the next district manager. He was retiring the first of the year.
Okay.
Day after Christmas, okay, so I got to back up even further. Okay, so after the first, I'm supposed to be the new district manager. That means a big pay raise, right? And I remember it was getting close to Christmas, and I remember thinking, my wife, we had gotten married at a young age. She was 16, I was 18. We both had to drop out of high school, and we got married, started raising a family right away. And we went to get married, you know, because we were going to have a baby, and we wanted, you know, the baby to have the name and all that stuff. And so we couldn't afford rings, you know, wedding rings. And so we went, my mom actually found some at a rummage sale. Okay. And they didn't fit, whatever, and they were
3 times too big.
Yeah, they were awful. But anyway, she paid $35 for the set. Mm-hmm. And that was our wedding rings, right? Well, I remember a friend coming to visit my wife. It was her best friend from school. Mm-hmm. And she married some rich guy in Georgia. She came back home to visit with my wife, Dawn. And I remember watching Dawn and her sit at the table, and she had a rock on her hand that was huge. Big old diamond hanging out. And I remember watching my wife, I don't know if she meant to do it or not, but I saw her kind of cover this little puny, you couldn't even see the diamond, it was so little. I remember watching her cover that up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she meant to do it intentionally or what, but I thought to myself, you know what? I had saved $7,000. Dawn and I had saved $7,000. I thought, I'm getting promoted here in a week. I'm going to go buy that ring for her, and I'm going to give it to her, you know? So I took all our savings, and I bought that ring. Gave it to her on Christmas Day. She was so happy. She cried, and I felt so good. It was nothing like the size of the ring that her friend had, but it was the biggest one I could afford, you know?
Yeah.
And it made her tickle pink. She was so happy. So, that made me happy, you know? And anyway, I get a call the day after Christmas, and it's my district manager. And he says, George, can you come in tomorrow? He says, I got to talk to you. And I said, well, what's it about? And he said, well, you'll find out tomorrow. He just blew it off. I thought, oh, well, he's getting me ready for that district manager position. We're going to start a little bit early, I guess, you know. So I had to be in there at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I drive to Kmart. I go in. My store manager's sitting here. The district manager's here. As soon as I walked in, he said, George, I need your keys to the store. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, because I'll probably be working out of Green Bay or something, as a bigger city. I thought, well, yeah, sure. You know, I take my keys off and I give them to him. And he says, I got some bad news for you. My boss is almost in tears because he loves me. I love him. I have so much respect for him and vice versa. And I'm like, what's the matter, boss? And he's like, George, just sit down. And I sat down and he said, hey, I got terrible news. He said, Kmart is firing every loss control manager in the company today. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know, you got to be kidding me. I said, I'm out? I'm supposed to be the next district manager. And he's like, they're firing everybody. And he said, I wanted to come here personally because you're my right-hand guy, and, you know, I wanted you to hear it from me. Otherwise, all the store managers around the country are just firing the loss control departments. Because that was when the beginning of Kmart going down, you know.
Yeah.
And so I was devastated. I left the store in tears. I mean, my store manager was crying. I was crying. I had never been fired in my life. So, you know?
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. I fired once, if memory serves correctly.
Yeah?
Not a pretty sight, but it is what it is. And, you know, spent 10 years with the company and one small little flaw, and that was it. So
That was it.
that was it.
It's devastating, isn't it?
It hurts. It hurts. I mean, trying to jump back up from it and get where you're at, you know, this day and age takes a while.
Yeah. So I came home and I couldn't face my wife, right? I was so upset. I was like, man, how am I going to go home and tell my wife, not only did I not get my promotion, that for the last 2 years I've been living out of motel rooms for this company, basically kissing their ass to get this job, because it was a huge pay raise.
Yeah.
You know, huge. You know, I think at the time I was probably making 30 grand a year, and this was like $150,000, $200,000 jump.
Big jump.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And so I bent over backwards, kissed their ass to get this. Not only did I not get the promotion, but I got fired. So I don't even have that paycheck coming in. And to make matters worse,
I knew this was coming.
took all the money out of our savings and bought that ring. So I came home and I could not pull in the driveway. And I remember circling, I would drive this block, this square block. I must have drove that for a half an hour. I could not get up the nerve to go in and tell my wife, I just lost everything for us. You know, how am I going to feed my kids? How am I, you know, all the shit's going through your mind, you know. That's all I
did.
did.
Yourself, though.
Yeah, but it's 13 years of my life
Oh, yeah.
that I spent working for corporate America. So anyway, that was the story of Kmart. Very devastating. I remember coming home, telling my wife what happened. She cried, and one of the milestones that turned my life around was that day. That day, I said to myself, never again will I let corporate America hold me by the nutsack and keep me where they had me, and then they threw me away, just like that.
I remember that story.
Yeah, and so, anyway, that's the story of Kmart, but it changed my life. It really did. From there, and the funny part of it is, about a month later, Kmart calls me back and hired me back as a loss control manager, because when word got out that all the loss control department had been fired, they were getting ransacked.
Jeez.
They were just not just customers, but employees were just robbing the places blind. So then they're like, okay, let's hire back like 2% of the loss control department. and it was very minimum. Well, I was one of them they wanted back.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, first I told them to get,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, and then I was like, I talked to my wife and she's like, George, it's the middle of winter. Nobody's hiring right now. Take it right now just so we do have food for the table, you know. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's do that. I'll go back, work my job, not with the same enthusiasm I had before.
Of course.
And they didn't get the productivity out of me that they would have gotten. You know, now I didn't give a shit about them because they didn't give a shit about me.
Exactly.
All I wanted now was that paycheck to feed my family until spring when I can get something else started. So we started in the lawn care business. And then, so from there, we just started mowing grass on the side. Bentley's scratching at the door. Yeah, let's see if you...
Hold on 1 second.
All right. I'll just go on with this. So we started the lawn care, and we did that on the side of working for Kmart. So during the day, my wife and my oldest boy, they would mow grass, and they got started at that. And then when I got off work, I would take over, and then we would mow on weekends. We did whatever we could to make extra money. You know, we knew we wanted to get something started, but we didn't know what. So lawn care. And I remember this. I remember asking my dad. I said, Dad, there's a guy on YouTube called Lawn Care Millionaire. And I said, Dad, this guy's making money. You know, he's making a lot of money in lawn care. What do you think about that? Should I get into that? And my dad said, George, don't do that. He said, there's no money in lawn care. And I was like, well, Dad, I think there is. Well, he was kind of right in a certain respect, but I did make money. What I had to find out was you couldn't just market to everybody and expect to get a big business. You had to market to the people that could afford your services. Mm-hmm. So that was a lesson that I learned early on. At first, we weren't making money. Once I started going knocking on doors to the rich people, I can remember one of mine was the funeral home in town, and they were rich people, well-to-do. And I asked them about mowing their grass, and they hired me, and I had this old piece of crap Murray mower that fell apart every other day, and an old wooden trailer that we made, and we spray painted it black. It was just a piece of shit, but it got us by, you know. And then we started making money doing that, and then the more lawn care customers we got, the more they would ask you to do other things like trimming the shrubs or weeding the garden or trimming trees or fertilization, weed control. And so then lawn mowing just went into landscaping. So we kind of transitioned, but I need to back up a little bit too, because before I even did that, I was always told, you know, if you're going to get into a business, do something you love. This is what you hear it all the time. So I loved hunting deer. So my brother and I said, what if we could make archery hunting videos and sell them and make money? So we started that up. You know, we bought this cheap, it was a big old camera in the day. It was a big old camera that went on your shoulder. Anyway, it was used. Everything was used. And we started from scratch. We made 3 hunting videos. And, I don't have them here.
No,
I have them in the house. But
I was going to say, I seen them in the house. All three of them up there. The old school VHS, if you can remember that one.
Yeah, the old VHS tapes. That's what they were made on back in the day. But anyway, that was the first business we started. And we struggled. And then, like in any business, but all of a sudden one year, we landed a big client called Gander Mountain. And Gander Mountain was a big retail store. They're kind of like a Bass Pro Shops or a Cabela's or a Dick's Sporting Goods. They were like that. And that year, they ordered $18,000 worth of videos from us. And I remember having to go to the bank and borrow the money from the bank to make those videos because we didn't have the money. Mm-hmm. It was a huge order. This $18,000 back then was about $180,000 or $200,000 worth today.
Yeah.
So I had to go to the bank and borrow the money. We did that, and they were ordering right before Christmas, and I thought, oh, we finally hit the big time. We finally are going to make some money. Wouldn't you know, Gander Mountain, right after Christmas, the first of the year, they filed bankruptcy.
Yep.
They didn't pay anybody. And I found out from talking to other vendors, like, you know, they sold guns, ammunition, bow and arrow stuff, knives. You talk to these other manufacturers, all of them got screwed, every one of them. And what Gander Mountain did is they went out and they rented these huge warehouses wherever they could find them, and they ordered heavy from all the vendors, and they stockpiled them in there, and then they filed bankruptcy, so that they could come out on the other end and start all over again. And that's just what they did. Yep. So we never got paid anything. We lost our ass with them. So I lost that business. That went downhill. All right. So I guess where I'm going with this is I've had businesses that worked, which we'll get to in a minute, and I've had some that have failed. Okay. Then I was also a private investigator for a while. So because I went to police science, I became a private investigator also, and I did that work, and I have, I don't even know if I should get into the stories about that, but I lost my, I will real quick. So one of the jobs that I was required to do was insurance companies would hire you. Like if you had a back injury, which was the case in this one. Now I did tons of these, okay? And it was you'd had cheating spouses, you did that, you did this insurance stuff was a big thing. Employee theft, you know, if their business partners were stealing from them, you did all kinds of this stuff. And it was all right up my alley, right? Well, one day, I'm doing this insurance claim. And what it was the guy claimed he hurt his back. So let's say it's you, Brock. So you hurt your back. Now, I was hired to come and find out if, in fact, your back is hurt. Why? They tried to settle with this guy. He wasn't settling, okay? He had thousands and thousands of dollars in medical bills. This guy was hurt. His back had been operated on half a dozen times. So my boss is like, go catch this guy doing something that he shouldn't be doing. You know, lifting, you know, moving around, all of that. You know, anything he's doing that's physical, we want to catch it. So I had to go next door, obtain permission from the guy across the street to film there. Not an easy task, but you do, because you have to be able to film in a legal. You have to have permission to film on private property, and you can't just sit on the road in front of this guy's place and film. So I had to sit across the road in the bushes and film. So then what I noticed was he had all these pallets out. Actually, my boss, he was looking at the film for the first couple of days. The only thing this guy did was go to the mailbox, go back to the house, and that's it. He didn't do anything physical. My boss says, well, we need to push him. I said, what do you mean? He said, he's looking at the footage, and this guy had pallets, like what you get a bunch of merchandise on, the wooden pallets. And he had stacks of them from where he worked at this paper mill. And so they must have been giving them away, whatever. He had a stack of them here, and he was selling them to people. He noticed there was a sign there. He said, go buy some from him. He says, walk up, tell him you want to buy 100 of these pallets. Then come back tomorrow with a trailer, set your camera up to film, and then he wanted me to come back like I was injured, like I had injured my hand. I had to tape up my hand so that I couldn't be throwing these pallets hardly. That way it would get the other guy, let's see if he's hurt or not, right? Because now he's got to kick in and help me load these pallets because I only have one hand.
Exactly, it's just you.
Yep. So I'm going by the direction of my boss. This is what he wants me to do, and to see if this guy is actually hurt. Sure enough, this guy is hurt. He sat down so many times while we were trying to load these pallets. I have one hand. He would grab the other side of the pallet. The guy had tears in his eyes. His back, he just got flushed. He got really hot. You could see his face getting red. And then pretty soon the tears are actually coming out of it. It was hurting him so bad by the time we got through loading half these pallets. And I was like, you know what? This guy is clearly hurt. So I said, hey, that's enough for now. You know, you go rest. I'll see if I can bring some help back tomorrow or something. And then I left, right? Went back, retrieved my camera, showed my boss the footage. I said, this guy is clearly hurt. Look how many times he had to sit down. He couldn't throw 3 or 4 pallets and he was sitting down. He was hurt. So anyway, boss said, okay, good, you did a good job, blah, blah, blah. So a few weeks later, when that court date was coming up, we go to court. And I was asked to testify because you have to testify that that's the footage that you shot, right? So I'm testifying. And the judge, you know, or his lawyer asked me if I had shot that footage and did I legally have the right, this and that. And I said, yeah, I do. Thank you guys for letting our dog in here. Whoever did that. This is Bentley. This is our boy. He is wonderful. He's got a tail like a whip, like a weapon. But anyway, so where was I at? Okay, so we're in court. Judge asked me, is this your footage? And I'm sitting here and I'm watching this footage play out. What I noticed was every time the guy had sat down, my boss, cut that footage out of that video.
Jeez.
He cut the footage out of that video. Now here, there's a 12-person jury over here, in the two lawyers, and they're going at it over this, and I had to stop everything. I looked over at my boss, and he knew what. When I looked at him, he was sitting in the back of the courtroom. When I looked at him, and I went like this, like, what the fuck is that? You know? And he just went like this to me. In other words, like, you better shut your frickin' mouth and go along with this.
Yeah.
Right? And I sat there, I'm on the witness chair, and then they were done with me, and I was going to leave. And I said, Your Honor, I said, I feel like I have to say something here. Well, objection from the other guy's lawyer.
Yeah.
And, or, my boss's team over there. And I said, look, yeah, that's the footage that I filmed, but this guy is hurt. And I'll tell you how I know this. And that guy kept objecting. You don't know that. You're not a doctor, blah, blah. I said, hey, let me tell you what happened. And the judge let me speak. So I talked to the jury members, the judge. I said, look, this guy was hurting so bad, he sat down a half a dozen times. He had tears in his eyes. There was no doubt in my mind that this guy was hurt. I even so went as far as to go back to my boss right there, because when he did this to me, I'm like, oh, no, you want to fuck me? I'm going to fuck you. So I pointed to him and I said, my boss took that footage out of this. He cut that out. And I told my boss this guy was hurt. I showed him the footage of the guy being hurt.
Yeah.
But he purposely took that out. While my boss was just, he was on fire back here. And that judge got pissed. The jury members right away, boy, they knew that the jig is up, So anyway, they found in the guy's favor that was injured. Yeah. And they gave him a bunch of money. I don't know how much he ever did. I don't remember what he got. He got a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you know what I got? I got fired.
Yeah,
I got fired. So that was the end of my private investigator stint, I guess you would say. Then after that, again we were doing the lawn mowing and the landscaping and all that. And then we opened up a retail garden center shop, okay? So people could come in, they could buy their flowers from us, their trees, their mulches, the dirt, rocks, all that stuff they use for landscaping. So we had that retail shop going for quite a few years. And then we had a big business come in, Menards. Walmart came in with their garden center. Menards come in with their big garden center. And our sales just dropped right off.
Yeah.
So they just killed us. They were selling things for our cost, what it cost us to bring them in.
Yeah.
Because we were buying right from the growers and stuff, and they were getting massive discounts so they could sell it for what our cost was. So finally we closed the doors on that. We realized that we weren't going to make any money. We had to pivot because we're losing money at this point.
Yeah.
So we got rid of the garden center, and then we started a lawn care company down in Florida. And the reason we started that, we would vacation in Florida. We would go down there once a winter, and we loved it. And we thought, hey, what if we could build a business here, a big business here? So anyway, we started the business down in Florida for lawn care. And the goal was to start that business and grow it. And then eventually, and when it was time for us to retire here in Wisconsin, we could go down there in the winter months and we could run that business, and it would be there, be a source of income for us for retirement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we could come here, work in the summer, and then go to Florida in the winter and work that. So that worked for 7 years. And then it got to be such a hassle. It got to the point where I would go down every winter and I would grow the business. I would go after marketing. I'd market. I grew the business really big. And then I had to leave. I had to come back here in the spring to work on our landscape company here. And as I did, all those people that we got slowly tapered right back up. They kept losing them. You'd hire new managers. You would hire new workers. This went on and on and on for 7 years. So anyway, it got so bad. They took one of our, we had a big NPR Isuzu truck, and they flipped it. Our workers flipped it going on an off-ramp, and they just destroyed the vehicle. And we were out we had a GPS tracker in the vehicle. And that tracker clocked them at 73 miles an hour when it went dead. It was going 73 miles an hour.
Jeez.
On a 35 mile an hour off-ramp.
Off-ramp, yeah.
So I know what happened. These two younger guys that were driving it, they were in their 20s, mid-20s. I'm sure they saw the exit and went, oh shit, and quick tried to whip it, and when they did, end over T-kill.
Yeah.
Manager calls me up. Now I'm in Wisconsin. He says, George, he said, the guys had a wreck with the truck, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, are they okay? Yeah, the guys are okay. They're fine. They're not, a little scratched up, nothing. They're fine. I said, okay. I said, we got to deal with the truck. We need to get a wrecker there, whatever we got to get. He's sending me pictures of it, just mangled, everything. The new mowers, we bought new mowers that year.
Yep.
Had a whole new setup on that truck, and they totaled it out. We had a total of $88,000 that we lost in that one accident. I told my wife, I said, that is the final straw. I said, I've had it with this place. And then the insurance company, two things happened out of that accident. Number one, the insurance company, when we turned it into them, they were also aware of the GPS thing and how it was locked at 73 miles an hour because they were giving us a discount for having those in the trucks, right? So that they could monitor the behavior of the vehicle, right? And they said, you guys were breaking the law when they flipped that truck. They were going 73 on a 35 mile an hour off ramp, so we're not covering it. So here we are out $88,000. That was and then to top it off, Brock, the boys were fine. The boys that were driving the vehicle were fine. I talked to them both on the phone.
Yeah.
The manager said they were fine. About a month later, or no, let me back it up. The boys, their parents show up at the crash site, right? Their parents show up, and then they take them to the hospital. And I'm like, what are they taking them to the hospital for? I'm talking to my manager. I'm like, I thought they were fine. He's like, George, they are fine. Well, I said, go up to the hospital and make sure they're fine. Find out why did they take them up there even, Because now I'm thinking, now I'm going to get another bill out of this, at the hospital. And, which I did. And he goes up there to see the boys. Their parents stop him and say, he's not talking to you. And the manager's like, what do you mean they're not talking to me? I was just talking to him a half hour ago,
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm their boss. And he's like, we're not talking to family law and landscape at all. You can talk to our attorneys. I'm like, are you frickin' kidding me? They sued us, Brian.
For their stupidity.
For their stupidity. Not only did we lose $88,000 in that crash, but they turned around and sued us on top of it. All right? And my insurance company settled with them. I don't remember the exact amount, but I think it was somewhere around the neighborhood of like $100,000 each or something. I'm like, what is wrong with society? You know what I mean? But that was the final straw. We had had enough of Florida.
Yep.
We're like, we're getting the hell out of here. We're going to sell the business, and that's what we did. We sold the business, came back to Wisconsin, and then what we did, we took the money from that, and then we opened up our first vape shop, okay? So, vaping. So, I was a smoker at the time.
Yeah.
And a friend told me about vaping, and they're just like, hey, you should try this. You can get off cigarettes. That's how we did it. So I tried it, and it tasted awful at first. The first ones that come out were god-awful. But anyway, it worked. It got me off cigarettes, so I was like, hey, this is kind of neat. I remember in Florida, there was a vape shop on, every block had a vape shop, it seemed like. And I was like, we don't have that back here in my town. So we started one. Took off really good. We took the money from that. We opened up another one in Rhinelander. Took off really good. Okay? So now we have 2 retail stores, both doing good. CBD came out.
Yeah.
When CBD came out, we're like, hey, why don't we be the first ones into that? Why don't we open up a retail store for that? So we did. And then, wouldn't you know it, we're just starting to get our clientele up there for the CBD store. COVID comes along.
Oh, yeah.
We were considered non-essential, so we had to shut all of our retail shops down. Okay? So we're like, okay, that's fine. We'll kick back in after this federal emergency is over, right?
Yeah.
And then what we found out is when we opened up the CBD store, all of our clients never came back. Why? Because during COVID, they found out they could still get their products if they got them online. So everybody went and bought them online. So there's no reason to come back to us at our retail shop because they can get them cheaper online. So we ended up closing that shop. So that was a failure, right? So as I talk to you guys about my experience and kind of what I've gone through, that was another failed business right there, okay? Didn't see it coming, and I truly believe to this day that business would be fine had it not been for COVID. I just never reopened it again after that. We closed it down, and I moved on to other things. So after we did that, I had a friend of mine in Florida, and so I guess back it up a little bit. He told me that he had gotten into mosquito control, and him and his wife wanted to get into that. He wanted to know if I wanted to buy his accounts. He's like, we're going to get out of lawn care altogether. You know, you're my friend up here. Would you be interested in buying the accounts? So I ended up buying the accounts. And then, so while that business was still operating before I sold it, I bought the accounts. And I always kept in touch with him. And I said, how's that mosquito thing working out? And I was shaking my head like, why would he get into that? You know, that's not going to do shit, you know. And he's like, George, it was the best thing I ever did. And I mean, you got to be kidding me. So he told me of the company that he belonged to. I won't say the name of it, but it was a big franchise for mosquito control. And he said, hey, he says, yeah, you know, this was great. You should get into it. So I thought, you know what? When I get back to Wisconsin, I'm going to look into that. So I looked into it, and I contacted that franchise, and they said the closest territory I could buy was in Chicago. And I said, I'm not going. Chicago's 5 hours from here. And I'm like, I'm not going to Chicago, and I'm not going to work out of there. And so I was talking with my buddy, and he's like, George, he says, you know, if you want to start a business, he said, I could help you start your business. And my wife and I talked about it, and I said, hey, look, our buddy's willing to help us get started. He knows the ins and outs of it already. He's been with them for a couple of years. Why don't we give it a shot? So we bought this we called it the Turd. It was a piece of crap, $500 van. It looked like a creeper van. Yep. It didn't have any windows in it.
Seen the pictures. I remember the pictures of the original.
It had more rust holes in this van than you could shake a stick at. It had more wobble. It had a death wobble when you hit about 60 miles an hour, you know, going down the road. But we're like, we're not going to stick a lot of money into it. Let's just try it, you know. So thank God I had the advice of my friend who helped me get started in that. And so we started the business. I can remember going down a dirt road with that van, and it filled with dirt inside. It was so cloudy in there, you had to roll the windows down to try to get the dirt out of it when you were on a dirt road. There were so many holes in it, you know. So anyway, it was awful. But at the time we called it Mosquito Busters. Yeah. And then our slogan was, who are you going to call? You know, like the Mosquito Busters.
Oh, yeah.
And so we thought that was really cool. And then the business took off. So we added another van the next year and another van the next year. And we just kept adding them in newer and newer vans too, you know. And then finally we said, hey, this thing has taken off so good. Why don't we franchise? Why don't we get into franchising? Didn't know anything about franchising. I knew very little. Anyway, there's a thing called a Federal Disclosure Document. It's a book about that thick that you have to go through, and it is nothing but legal jargon. It's all, you can't even read it. You need to be a lawyer to read the thing. But every year, and we had to pay a lawyer a lot of money to start franchising. But one of the things, we had to have a lawyer, and the franchise lawyer says to us, he's like, you guys need to change your name right out of the gate. And I said, what do you mean? Why would I change that name? It's such a cool name, Mosquito Busters, you know? And he's like, because it's heavily protected. Yeah. It is very, very trademarked, very heavily protected. The people from Ghostbusters,
yeah,
they own that shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he said, do it now, where you only have a couple franchises sold. You can change it. You guys can change your name now. Don't wait till you get big, and then you have to call up 100 franchises and say, oh, by the way, guys, y'all got to peel those wraps off your vehicles and put another $6,000 wrap on your vehicles. You got to change all your marketing materials, everything. He's like, do it now while you're small and avoid them coming after you, because those guys can own your business if you keep this up.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to build a business as Mosquito Busters and then have the people that own the trademarks come and sue me, and then I lose it all. You know what I mean? So we changed the name to Mosquito Police. And we were trying to come up with a creative name, a name that we thought was kind of neat, kind of stood out a little bit, you know. I think that police part really drew a lot of attention. I hear that from a lot of people, that is like the coolest name, you know. And we have a slogan on our vehicles. It's our German Shepherd, Jerry Lee, which looks just like a police dog, so that we made that part of our whole scheme, you know. But so we started doing that, and you know, franchising was okay, but what we found out was there was so much red tape, so much paperwork. we were finding out that to do business in different states, they would charge you thousands of dollars. You had to register your business with that state and pay them thousands of dollars just to do business in that state. And even then, they have a whole new set of rules for you. The franchise rules in Florida are not the same as in Texas, are not the same as in New York, are not the same as in Maryland. They're all different.
Oh, yeah.
So you literally had to have a lawyer on staff half the time.
Yeah.
Because when these guys would call in, it's a whole new set of franchise laws for California, let's say. And now we have to call the lawyer. And then, of course, you get the huge bill from the lawyer. You know, he'll charge you $10,000 to do all the paperwork for that guy out there. So not only do you got to pay thousands of dollars to work in that state, to be allowed to work in that state. Now you got to pay 10 grand to the lawyer to do all the paperwork for you. You get all that done before you've made a dime, you know. And so we said, this is insane. It's just insane. And then when you're dealing with multiple states like I just talked about, it got so bad. We were shelling out. I think one year we shelled out like almost $100,000 just in all these fees. And I'm like, God damn, we are losing our ass here, you know? So I had a friend of mine who was a very successful entrepreneur, and he said, why don't you do what I have done? And he told me what he did. He said, I created partnerships. And I said, well, you know, what are you talking about? I didn't really know anything about it. I think a partner to me was, hey, Brock, you want to go in on a garbage cleaning business, garbage can cleaning business, or picking up dog poop?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, this is what I did, you know. I put together this program, and he was a doctor. So what he did is he went around and he would open up these clinics. And he would go after these doctors that were out there in the market. And he would say, hey, if you come work for me, he would steal them away from hospitals and stuff. And he would say, if you come work for me in this clinic, I'll give you 75% of whatever we make. 25 comes to me, or 10. I think it was 10 came to him, and 15 was administrative costs. But at the end of the day, it was somewhere around 25. You know.
Okay.
But anyway, they got a big chunk of money. I don't know the exact numbers. I don't remember exactly what they were, but it was some kind of a split like that. And he became very successful. And so what he did is he just kept working on his business, and he just kept sticking the money back into it, and before you knew it, he had over 400 different clinics all over the United States. So he's a very, very wealthy guy.
Oh, yeah.
And so I took his advice, and I'm like, you know, I kind of had it with this franchise stuff. So we peeled back from the franchising. It cost a lot of money to change over to partnerships. We must have spent 50 grand in legal stuff just getting that set up.
Yeah.
You know, and so there was a lot. There was a lot of terminology. You can't say this, you can't say that, you can't do this, you can't do that. Partnerships are a whole different animal than franchising. But once it was all said and done, it is so much easier because you eliminate all the red tape. You just, it's as simple as signing a contract.
Yeah.
Sign the contract, I get them started in the business, and away they go.
Exactly.
All right, so we went from Farm Kid here today. We did all this video. We're going to wrap this up. We did this so that you guys would have an idea of who you're talking to. And we started a couple of channels that we've had. One I've had going for a long time. It's called G Packard. So G is in George, and then Packard. So if you type that into YouTube or Rumble, that channel will come up. And then also we started a new channel this year called Mosquito Police Millionaire. And that's also on YouTube. So if you guys are interested in finding out more information, we've got hundreds of videos out there that are all basically business related. So I've made millions over the years, and the whole purpose of getting together with the podcast thing is to just another outlet for us to share our information, and at the same time we can be talking to people about our partnerships. Brock is a partner.
Yeah.
And I thought that's why it'd be a good idea to have Brock on. And on our next episode, we're going to get into that. We're going to talk a little more about how the partnership thing works and his experience with the Mosquito Police.
Breaking down everything and so on and so forth with the business parts, and it just doesn't work for just this. It works for a lot of things too. So it'll help out a lot of people in this.
Different businesses.
In different businesses, different aspects, genres, whatever you want to call them. But this whole thing that we're going to be doing will break everything down decently. But you know, the mosquito thing, like I said, I went from being, you know, little kid from up north all the way to trying to do the whole cook thing and finding out that to get your name as a cook, you have to put blood, sweat, tears, fingers, knives, you know, the whole 9 yards, just to get your name in at a head area before you start building your own business.
So Brock wanted to be a cook. So he went
Yeah.
to school. He went to college to be a cook.
And I did. I tried. Around here, there isn't much for like high end cooking, so I wanted to try something different. Talked to George. Came on as a tech. The sarcastic joke: the jack of all trades, besides just a tech, master of none, bar none. And then he started talking to me about the partnerships, and here we are right now. I mean, it's working really, really good. We great company, great place to be at, and everything else. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the end of this episode, you guys. We hope you'll tune in for more episodes. This is the very first one, and we'll talk to you guys soon.